Nate, we are back with an updated look at what we trade every single first round pick for. And we are even diving into the second round of this one to give you guys that much more value, what to move picks for, what to think about moving picks for. You know, one of the biggest tools you can have in your toolkit is being able to trade out of drafts and know what to target. Another great weapon you can add to your toolkit is patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, getting in that Discord server, hanging out with us and the rest of the community. Try it out for free for a whole week. Let us know what you think. Check out some bonus podcasts while you're there. And of course, before we get into it, please like the video, comment down below what you thought of these. If you're trying to trade your first round picks and second round picks, what are you looking to get in return? With that said, we do have a bit of a twist that we'll get to as we go along. But first things first, let's get to the first pick, the 101. And per our Dynasty Rewind ADP, which you can get via patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, the 101, Caleb Williams. But you're trading the pick away.
Guess I am.
What are you looking to pick?
Yeah, you know, I already have two quarterbacks on my team. I could use a third one, but maybe I got like a guy like Will Levis or something like that. So maybe quarterback isn't my biggest need, and I could go Marvin Harrison Jr. here. We've seen it happen, you know, where Marvin Harrison is the 101 in some Superflex mocks. Let me see what I can do with moving this pick. Maybe I don't want to get Marvin Harrison. Maybe I want to see if I can get a wide receiver and something on top. So, Bob, I'm going to ask you, because you're the one trading for the 101 in this scenario. So you're saying, Nate, what do I need to give you to get the 101 off you? And it's not easy to get the 101 off me, especially. So what I'm going to ask for is I need a top wide receiver because, like I said, I already have my quarterback. So give me Puka Nacua and a 2025 first, and we have a deal.
And here comes the twist, like you hinted at. Now, in these videos, we're talking about the opportunity to counter here and kind of talk through what this trade should, could, maybe will look like. And I think there are people out there that would do something similar to this deal. We've seen people buying on Marvin Harrison Jr., not even necessarily the 101, for similar costs to this. And while I don't agree with that, I know that people out there, there's probably some people out there that may be lower on Puka that think the whole year's a fluke kind of a thing. I'm not one of those people, unfortunately. So it's going to be a little harder for me to get it, but I 100% get that this is the 101. And if you are moving off the 101, regardless of your situation, you should look for quality or volume or a mix of quality volume. And I think you're getting that this, but my counter here, and instead of giving you a 25 first, I'm willing to give you that pick a year earlier, but it's a 24 second instead of a 25 first with Puka. And I think that's where my line is. And I'm looking at an early to mid 24 second. I'm not throwing you a late 24 second.
Like the 203 or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, somewhere in that range, 203, 204. But that's my counter to you. If you're willing to accept it, we have a deal. If not, that's where I think it lies. And maybe it lies somewhere in the middle that you viewers can decide. What are your thoughts on that counter, Nathaniel?
Yeah, I appreciate the 24 second. I appreciate you moving it up a year for me, Bob. But, you know, it's the 101. This is a hard pick to move off of. And, you know, when you move off of this pick, you got to make sure that you're truly improving your team. And Puka Nacua definitely improves my team. But I don't know if I feel strong enough about that early second where I am getting those extra assets I really feel strong about and feel like I can build around. Because if I'm moving Caleb Williams off of my team, who I think is an incredible prospect for the quarterback position and one of the best that we've seen over the last couple of years, you know, I want a stud like Puka Nacua, someone kind of guaranteed like that. But I do really need that first. You know, maybe it's a 26 first. Maybe we're in a rebuild over here, and we want to take advantage of the 101 right now because we earned it, and we just want to get more, you know, draft capital in the future. We get a guy to build around. We get a 26 first. Maybe that makes it a little bit easier for you to move something like that and get your guy. But I still need that first round pick because I need those cornerstone players to build around.
I don't hate that. I think I would definitely be more willing to consider the 26 first. I hate the mindset of, well, I have 2 years to get that pick back. While factual, it doesn't make it any easier to get the pick back. It just gives you time to do it. So I'd definitely be more in the realm of discussing that avenue. Maybe I need like some sort of lesser compensation back, like a third round pick, something along those lines to help me out. But I think we're somewhere on the right path to getting that deal done. But speaking of which, let's move on to the 102 per DR ADP, Dynasty Rewind ADP, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the pick, but, you know, I need a quarterback, and he went at 101, Caleb Williams. I don't love, pun intended, Beautiful pun intended. The rest of the quarterbacks on the board right now, I'm just not sold on them. We've seen a lot of quarterbacks bust out. Not all quarterbacks, albeit drafted early, are guarantees. So I'm going to go after my hometown quarterback, Jordan Love, and see, maybe I can get a third on top. Maybe I can't. If I can't, it is what it is. No quarterback in this class has proven what Jordan Love already has, and that's that he can play in the NFL and he can be a top 12 quarterback in fantasy. You're hoping to get that out of the other quarterbacks in this class. I love Marvin Harrison Jr. I think it's one of those where both sides are getting a good asset here.
Mm-hmm.
And, it kind of comes into that discussion, since it is two different positions. Which position do you need more? If Jordan Love is the quarterback one on that team, maybe you're having less luck getting this kind of deal done. But we have to keep in mind, players come from all over the place on rosters. And if Jordan Love wasn't drafted to be your guy in this year's startup, after we've seen what we saw, Jordan Love could have been your quarterback 3 or 4 on a taxi squad, probably off a taxi squad now. He would have to be, actually. But that's my offer to you, Nate. Do you have a counter? Are you interested in this deal? What are you thinking?
I am definitely interested. I agree that I have some question marks about the rest of the quarterbacks in this draft class. And I think there's a lot of potential in all of them. I think that they could all turn out to be really good, But Jordan Love, we've seen him do it now. It took a while, but we saw a really, really good season from him in 2023. And for me to go get Marvin Harrison Jr., that cornerstone wide receiver I can build around, already a top 6 wide receiver in Dynasty in most people's eyes, including ours, I'm willing to make this move, especially if I have, another quarterback on my team. I have a league where I have Lamar Jackson and Jordan Love. And Jordan Love's my quarterback too. Well, if I don't have great wide receivers, this is a move I can make. If I have a Baker Mayfield at my quarterback 3, this is a move that maybe I just kind of move my positions around. I give you the 3rd round pick on top 2 because I'm getting that stud in Marvin Harrison Jr. And even if I still need a quarterback and I don't want, Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe I'm like, I lost Jordan Love, but I still need a quarterback. I can take this 102 and I can move down to the 103, the 104 and pick up a quarterback and possibly pick up a 25 first or an early second on top of that, for someone to come up here and pick up Marvin Harrison Jr. because this is that top 2 tier. So if I still need a quarterback and don't necessarily need Marvin Harrison, I still think this could be a good deal for the 102, and then you could flip the 102 to get your quarterback in something else.
I was going to add on that point as well. Beautiful add-on, because while the ADP is what it is, we know as well as anybody that ADP does not dictate actual draft order, because there are going to be picks that are made that are out of left field, that don't make sense to you, don't make sense to us, don't make sense to anybody else in your league, but that one person who hit the draft button. And there are going to be players out there that are not sold on Jordan Love, and that's fine. That's how you get this deal done, in all honesty, somewhat. And some people will just see the value in it, but there are going to be people that want to sell high on Jordan Love. And I think this is how you somewhat take advantage of that and better your roster. So speaking of that, we are moving on to the 103. Dynasty Rewind ADP dictates Drake May at this pick, but you're trying to sell out of it to get something else.
Yeah. Once again, I don't need this quarterback, whether it's Drake May, whether it's Jaden Daniels, whatever it ends up being. I want to build around some other positions right now, let's say. So if I'm moving off the 103, this is a little of a weird spot in the first round because, like we said, you have that top 2. It's pretty much guaranteed who's going 1, 2, Caleb and Marvin Harrison Jr. You get to this point, and depending on how you feel, you kind of have the pick of the board for these next couple of picks. You kind of have the choice. There's not necessarily a top value that's necessarily falling to here. Unless maybe you're looking outside the quarterback position, there might be some more obvious ones. But I'm looking to move the 103 for Brandon Ayuk. And I also need another piece on top of that for the 103. So DeAndre Swift, the Chicago Bears running back, who I think is being a little slept on right now, is going to be a really good producer for the next 2 years. So give me Brandon Ayuk and DeAndre Swift. If you don't want to move off your running back, maybe a late 2025 first. I understand you're a competing team, so maybe you don't want to move off DeAndre Swift, Bob.
I don't hate this. But as much as and I agree that I think there's people out there sleeping on DeAndre Swift, because the thing is, nobody, in my opinion, is coming for him in that backfield. Yeah. Nobody has the pedigree. Nobody has the production that DeAndre Swift has had, albeit not to the level of what we've wanted out of DeAndre Swift. But fact of the matter is, no pedigree, no draft capital, no cash investment. DeAndre Swift is the guy there. He's going to get the work in what I believe to be an ascending offense at this point. That's what makes me hesitant to move off him in this deal. I don't hate this starting point, though, because I can look at your roster. I can't give up Swift, but I can see that you do have somewhat of a gaping running back hole in your roster. So while I'm willing to meet your need at running back, I'm going to look down my depth chart a little bit, and I'm going to counter with Brandon Ayuk and Zamir White, somebody who's primed to take over a little bit more of a role. Right now is the running back one in that offense, just has to outlast the draft. So there's a little risk you're piling on, but this makes it a little bit more palatable for me to move off of a Brandon Ayuk, who I really like as well. That needs to be mentioned. I'm a huge fan of Brandon Ayuk. I think all of us here at the channel are. And the thing is, too, there's some risks there that I get to move off of to get to this 103 pick. So what are your thoughts on that counter? I'm coming back at you with Brandon Ayuk. Zamir White still filling out a running back role for you. Like I said, has some upside this season for sure.
Yeah, I think if you replace DeAndre Swift with Zamir White, we're going from the value in my head of DeAndre Swift around that late first round pick, like I mentioned. Maybe we sub in like a late 25 first. Zamir White, more of like a mid second in my mind, value wise. So, is there a way that we can maybe meet somewhere in the middle? And it's like that early second round value. And at the running back position, is that maybe a guy? Is it David Montgomery if you're moving off someone who's maybe aging?
Sure.
Derrick Henry is a great win now buy I'm looking at right now. I know he's getting up there in age, but in that Ravens offense, I expect him to find the end zone a lot this year. I like Zamir White, but there's still enough question marks around him going into the draft. Now, if he comes out of the draft and he's still in the same position he is, I'm all in on Zamir White. I'm a big fan of what he did last year at the end of the year. But you know me, Bob, I am hesitant to buy into backfields that have risk, especially before the draft. I just don't feel like there's a lot of upside there for me. It's only downside, really. I'm going to be hesitant to take Zamir White unless you want to add on maybe another second round pick on top of this. Maybe you need like a third back to kind of make that work for you. I would understand. But I would want a slightly better running back, probably like David Montgomery, Derrick Henry, maybe even Brian Robinson. I might have a little bit more interest in the Zamir White. Because I know what his role is going into the season.
Sure. Oddly enough, I have Brian Robinson on my roster as well. I think I'd be willing to kick that back in there instead of Zamir White. So I think we can call this one a deal as well. Speaking of hopefully making another deal, we have an obligatory mention we have to mention in these videos and every video we have. 104, Dynasty Rewind ADP is Malik Neighbors, and I have to know my audience. And my audience not only loves this player, but I know you have been on different sides of the fence for this player, but I'm targeting Drake London at 25 second for Malik Neighbors. Now, this is, as we can see, where we're kind of seeing wide receivers come off the board. Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze is going to be in discussions here as well. Pick your flavor between those two. They're both great wide receivers. If one has somebody over the other, I'm not going to really fight too much on it. But either way, I'm expecting these guys to be in consideration more and more as we creep down the board. I'm targeting Drake London as much as I see the potential in Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors, and probably would prefer to have them over Drake London in a lot of instances. We saw Drake London go to a very unfavorable offense his first 2 seasons, and that led to him falling well short of expectations and being devalued in our eyes. Not necessarily everybody else. Everybody still, or a lot of people, I should say, still had very high expectations that didn't come to fruition. We all love the possibilities of these 2 top wide receiver rookies going to Los Angeles, Arizona, or even Chicago is, like I said, an ascending offense, and there's room to grow over time. Not necessarily year one. It's going to be crowded year one, but they could just as easily end up in New England, New York. Pick your poison, which New York you end up in, or Tennessee, which, hey, some people might think New York is actually a plus, New York Jets, that is, or Tennessee. Then how do we feel about these rookies in the interim between now and then? If I'm a competitive team, I'd much rather put my focus into Drake London. And when you're trading out with these picks, a lot of your focus should be to either get, young established players that are already maybe not producing yet, but are on the trajectory to, or you're getting that really proven production that can help you win championships sooner rather than later, either which way. And I think Drake London is a heck of a lot closer than Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze at this point. And I know you're going to be tempted to go up and get one of these guys. So I'm trying to get Drake London off your roster, give you an exit strategy. What are you thinking on this one, Nate?
Bob, I can't keep Drake London on my roster. Maybe I traded for him earlier in the season because he was actually a value for once. And I was like, hey, I got to go get myself some Drake London shares. Finally, this is my entry point. I'm so excited to have some Drake London on my teams. This all happens. He's now valued as a top 12 dynasty wide receiver. and I got to move off him again. I just can't keep him for a season, it seems. So, I got to move Drake London in 25 for Malik Neighbors in the 104. This is an easy trade for me. And what it comes down to is, as much as I like Drake London, what we've been so excited about Drake London in the past is that he has very little competition. And right now on paper, he still has very little competition in that wide receiver room. Darnell Mooney is the wide receiver 2 right now. Kyle Pitts, of course, is there. But with this new offense, this new regime, are they going to continue to not invest in the wide receiver room, especially with how we've seen wide receivers be invested in across the NFL? I saw a mock draft like last week where they actually had Malik Neighbors go to the Falcons, which would be incredible.
Just want to implode.
Oh, I would love that, just from the chaos that would create. I don't think that's going to happen, but a day 2 wide receiver goes there. Obviously, Drake London is still wide receiver 1. But in this new look offense with all these weapons, with Kirk Cousins and a quarterback I still love, but coming off an Achilles injury, a little bit older, coming into a new system, is that production there day 1? And there's a lot of competition to be a top 12 wide receiver right now in Dynasty. And Malik Neighbors, I feel really good about him and better than Drake London straight up. And one way that I really want to emphasize why I like Malik Neighbors better, even though he hasn't stepped foot in the NFL better yet. Drake London, throughout his 2 years, now he's been dealing with some bad quarterback play, but this is irregardless of volume. His yak rec, his yards after the catch per reception, career average is 3 yards after the catch per reception. It's not great. Now his contested catch rate's over 50% through his career. That's where he wins, but he doesn't create a lot of yards on his own. And that's what Malik Neighbors does so well. And I think the NFL is going to continue to really invest into those players and give them opportunities. And those guys, no matter the game script, they're going to get opportunities. No matter the defense that they're playing, they're going to get opportunities. I'm going to go with Malik Neighbors here over Drake London straight up. So I will pay the price at the second on top of it as well to go get Malik Neighbors. No problem. I'll make this deal, Bob.
I love it. I love making deals. Just a couple quick notes I want to add on your reservations with this offense. For what it's worth, I think I'm not super concerned about the Achilles with Kirk Cousins. While it's always unknown, uncertain, we have seen quarterbacks at least come back from Achilles injuries 20 years ago and do fine. Vinny Testaverde and Dan Marino are the 2 that I believe I can think of off the top of my head. So still limited. We're hoping to see Kirk and now Aaron Rodgers do it. Who knows? I'm not super concerned about that. That's not factored in. I do understand the concern with the volume competition coming in. However, Kirk Cousins, one of very few quarterbacks who has supported 2 top 12 wide receivers twice, that being Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, and then Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. He can do it. He can support multiple, entities, and that's 2 top 12. He just needs to have 1 top 12 for Drake London to be really worth it. So I'm not concerned, but I get it. It also depends on what wide receiver they add. If they add somebody I like, that's a different question. But if they go and add Malachi Corley, I'm
not too worried about that.
But if they go and add, give me a good day 2 guy.
They go and add Xavier Worthy in the beginning of the second.
That'd be fun. I still think he'd be okay, but because of just such different play styles, I think they'd be.
Or okay. Troy Franklin. Say Troy Franklin goes there.
I don't know. I'm tough, but either way, moving on from Drake London. That's enough Drake London talk. Obligatory Drake London mention in the books for today. We're moving on to the 105 Dynasty Rewind ADP of Jaden Daniels coming off the board at this pick. So we got another quarterback here. Nate, what are you trying to get for this 105?
Yeah, I have a similar strategy here where if I'm moving all these picks, I usually want 2 assets back. I like to do if I'm going to move 1 good thing, I want 2 things back, and I want 2 good things usually as well. And the easiest thing to build around in the NFL in Dynasty is wide receivers right now because they have the longevity. You have, a lot more confidence in their role in their future than running backs. And it's kind of hard at this point, like the 105, Jaden Daniels, it's kind of hard to move him straight up for another quarterback because you have the unknown of Jaden Daniels. So can you move him straight up for a quarterback you really feel better about? Not really, most likely. Here, I'm looking at a wide receiver that is maybe a little undervalued right now, and that's Michael Pittman Jr. I think someone that is certainly outside of the top 12 in Dynasty, but is probably not that far out of the top 12, because when you look at his actual production and the targets that he gets, he is one of the better wide receivers in fantasy football for volume and maintaining that volume. And even with my reservations with Anthony Richardson and just the lack of game time that he's had throughout his college career and pro career, Shane Steichen has been an incredible offensive coordinator so far. He's talked very highly about Anthony Richardson and his processing ability. And whether or not Anthony Richardson can support an entire offensive cast of fantasy football relevant players, that's not going to be really relevant to me, because he's definitely going to support Michael Pittman Jr., who is out there with a 30% target share and has the ability to create yards after the catch, win those contested catch abilities, get down the field, win on screens. He's very versatile and probably underrated by everyone, including myself. But nonetheless, I want a guy like Michael Pittman Jr. that I can take advantage of that value and also get a running back, a young running back that I believe is ascending as well, in Tyjae Spears. So I'm looking to move the 105 right now from Michael Pittman Jr., Tyjae Spears. You could maybe insert another running back of around similar value that maybe you feel better about. Some other running backs around Tyjae Spears right now, like on Keep Trade Cut, are David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Najee Harris. Some of those, you get some older productive guys, you get some younger guys still with potential. I think moving a pick in this top 7, top 8, like the 105, for a top wide receiver and another running back that you can put into your lineup is a good move to, make that one thing into two good things for your team. So, Bob, what do you think? Michael Pittman Jr. and Tyjae Spears for the 105.
You, sir, have a deal. I accept your trade offer. And while I do, I'm with you very much on Michael Pittman. I think we're pretty lockstep on that. I, do have some concerns about the overall production that he spreads around that offense. Whatever tight end they end up with wide receivers, my boy Josh Downs, etc. But the big, kind of, throw in here was a good one for me, because I am just not. I don't want to deal with that Tennessee backfield right now. They go and invest in Pollard. They have this new offense coming in, albeit, hopefully Will Levis in year 2 is better. It's just messy to me. And while there's value to be had in there, I think there's, I think the value into this, you probably win in terms of how this deal shakes out mathematically. I think I'd rather take my shot with the 105, either invest in the quarterback of Jaden Daniels. If I just gave up one of my top wideouts, I'd be pretty steered towards the direction of going with Rome Odunze here, which is actually the ADP of our next pick, spoiler alert. That's where I'm at. I think it's pretty decent. If you're higher on Spears, you might have a little bit more hesitation than I do. There's a list of wide receivers or running backs that you can maybe swap in that Nate mentioned previously, but I'm pretty happy moving Spears and Pittman for this deal. And like I said, maybe targeting Rome Odunze, who you're kind of re-rolling at that point a little bit and giving up. You're getting significantly younger. I mean, you're going from a 26-year-old wideout, going to be 27 soon, to a 22-year-old wideout. So pretty big difference there. You're kind of, probably again expecting to take a hit on the production side. If you had the 105, you can kind of probably do that a little bit. Maybe put yourself closer to that rebuild than contending. But hey, these are the decisions we have to make. And I'll move right along to the 106. This one I struggled with because the pick on the board didn't fit what I really wanted to target with this pick value-wise. And the pick on the board, the DR ADP, as previously mentioned, Rome Odunze. You brought up a great point in the pre-show, and that's what actually made me willing to put this on here, is that right now we have Brock Bowers, again, the next pick ahead, the 107 is DR ADP of Brock Bowers. A lot of people put Brock Bowers at the end of the tier of the top elite players in this class, right or wrong. But you brought up the point of, honestly, he could shake out to be a top 5, maybe top 4 pick, even depending on how things shake out. It has to be a pretty darn good landing spot to get that high, I think. At the end of the day, like we said before, drafts are wonky. ADP is not a guideline. ADP is not a Bible. This is our best guess. This is the average of how it shakes out. So, hey, maybe people are looking at Brock Bowers in this range. I'm looking to go get whatever top tight end plus I can get, because I know that there are very few tight ends that Brock Bowers isn't going to be slotted over, and that list probably ends with Sam Laporta. And so the main target I'm looking to go get, Trey McBride, who at this point in the offseason, if they add somebody in the draft, at worst, he's the second receiving option in that offense for great tight ends, young tight ends that have produced already. That's what we want. Guys that have quick path to volume, quick path to production, great efficiency metrics over volume last year. when he, got into that starting role. So I'm basically just looking to shop around my league, see whatever tight end plus I can get.
Mm-hmm.
That list also includes Kyle Pitts plus, Dalton Kincaid plus.
Yep.
Maybe you even go as far as chasing an Evan Ingram, who I'll mention later, and you get a significant plus, like a full 25 first and probably another piece on top. That's kind of what I'd be looking to do with this pick. I'd love it more if it was the 107 because I feel more secure about it being Brock Bowers. But hey, I got the draw of the 106. I made the list. It happens. But Nate, where are you on this trade offer?
Before we get into that, one other thing, you were mentioning some other tight ends you could, move and try to get, a tight end +4. And we mentioned a lot of young tight ends that have ascended into this league recently and have been exciting. And it's, it is nice to be like, hey, I can take a young tight end like Brock Bowers and move this value pick for another young tight end and get something on top of it. That's good. But also, I think what shouldn't also be mentioned is also moving, if you're going to move a pick to go ahead and get a guaranteed tight end, why not go after a guy like Mark Andrews and get Mark Andrews plus? Because Mark Andrews right now is not even considered a top 5 tight end in a lot of dynasty rankings. A guy like TJ Hawkinson as well is kind of outside that top 5 for a lot of people right now coming off the injury. So moving this pick for one of those, they're not that old. They're not Travis Kelce. They're not even George Kittle at this point in their age. So, going after those guys and getting something on top of that would also be very lucrative, I think, for someone who's looking to find that guaranteed stud tight end for their lineup and wants to use the 106 to make it happen. That being said, you're moving the 106. I love Rome Odunze, Bob. I love Rome Odunze so much. So I am willing to move Trey McBride for Rome Odunze. Now, what I'm going to actually add on top to make this pick, I don't know if I'm going to put a second here because it does feel like a lateral move, kind of. Trey McBride for the 106. It seems like pretty fair value. I'm willing to put the third on it though, to make it happen.
Well, what about a second, third swap instead of
in 2025, or are you thinking maybe you have like the 208 and I have the 303?
I'd be okay with that too. I'd be okay with a little upgrade.
Yeah.
To get on top of that as well. Either one.
Yeah, I would do either one of those. I think that little bit of value to make it happen. I'm cool with that because as much as I love Trey McBride and another tight end of that caliber, I really like Rome Odunze, and I think that while wide receiver is rather easy to replace, I don't think it's easy to replace a guy at like Rome Odunze's talent. And I think it's probably a little bit easier to replace a tight end like Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, with some of those other tight ends that are available right now.
Yeah, and I really like you brought up the TJ Hawkinson pick, especially for teams that might be looking for production now, which is why I think for the reason his values dipped, because TJ Hawkinson, he is a tight end, I guess too, but was what at some point probably tight end 2 during the season when he was popping off before his injury, and still 26 years old. Yes, he might not be perfect this year, but he still has 4 or 5 more years of at least of like realistic expectation production. So I like that shout out too, but I want to get Trey McBride some love. I don't know if we've given him enough this off season yet. So I wanted to get him in there as well. So moving on to the 107 here. Dynasty Rewind ADP suggests Brock Bowers is the pick. And one thing that I love that you did with this pick before we get into it, one of the greatest things you can do trading out of your picks is to target other positions that don't make sense on the board right now. You can address needs this way instead of reaching down the board for a position that doesn't make sense to pick, given the value, going best player available, etc., or the best value available. Love your suggestion here. It's not going to happen, prelude, but go ahead and talk about it.
All right. Yeah. So far we've gone down the DR ADP and, we haven't talked about any running backs. And even in our trades that we made, we have only mentioned some running backs as kind of throw-in pieces or as like a secondary piece in the trade. So at this point, you're at the 107. You might be, if you earn this, you're like a middling team. You just made the playoffs and got bounced out in the first round. So you need to maybe not go into a rebuild, maybe not even a retool. You just need to add some production to your team. And getting a guy like Jonathan Taylor would really take your team to the next level, make you that contender most likely. And I think at the 107, we are around the Jonathan Taylor value-wise because he's older than Breece Hall, Bijan, Gibbs. He's not even like within 2 years of those guys at this point. So he's looked at still as a top 5 running back, and absolutely should be. And I think his production is going to be top 5 this year. But I do think he's being slightly undervalued because he's not as young as those other guys. So I think he's a good target to go after when you have one of these top, 7 first-round picks. Can we go after a guy like Jonathan Taylor? Because we can't draft a guy like Jonathan Taylor in this draft. So like you said, using these picks to go get positions that you probably can't draft right now, but we can still use this value of the pick to go improve that position on our team. So I'm just going to give you the straight up, hey, here's the 107 for Jonathan Taylor, whether it's Brock Bowers, we just talked at length about, currently the tight end 2 on Keep Trade Cut. Bob had just checked. Or maybe you're really interested in one of the quarterbacks that's still available at this point. So 107 for Jonathan Taylor. What you're saying no? You're saying no already?
Yeah, I will say no. And I think a big part of it is because of what the value indicates on the board, because it's hard for me to find a lot of value in trading for moving a running back for a tight end, because there's just so much positional difference in production there. And albeit Brock Bowers is the top one, I struggle with that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think it's possible that you could get Jonathan Taylor at this cost, because I think there are people who are wary. He's 2 years removed from having a really good season, and he's really only had a couple of good seasons. But at the end of the day, I think most people, if it is a competitive team, I think you're struggling to get this done. If it's a rebuild, it might be a heck of a lot easier than you think. But I'm coming back. Can you add on a second round pick either this year or next? Or can you tier down, throw me a running back that's either older, maybe a little lesser? Can you throw me back Aaron Jones? Or can you throw me back James Conner and an additional third next year? Something along those lines to kind of soften the blow of, I'm giving up a top running back. And like I said, I don't think the pick comp, if it was the 106, oddly enough, I think our, last 2 points kind of would be better reversed, but it is what it is. If Rome Odunze was the pick on the board here, I'd be much more interested in this.
That's what I was going to ask. Say Trey McBride did go off of the 106 and Rome Odunze was on the board here.
It would be a much easier deal for me. Maybe I still need a little bit more, but maybe it's like a 25 third versus needing something else, like a replacement piece. That's the type move where you're kind of almost willing to change not your entire trajectory on, but one that doesn't kill the trajectory you're already in. Whereas, going running back to tight ends take a little bit more time to produce, harder to replace that top 5 running back production without getting anything back. So if that was the case, definitely be easier, but that's kind of where I'd be looking at in the situation that we're in. Can you throw me a second round pick in return, tier down at running back, give me Aaron Jones and that first round pick as well? Or can you slide me James Conner and a 25 third along with that first round pick? What do you think about those options?
Yeah, I'll add Aaron Jones on there. I think you're going to be higher on Aaron Jones than myself, so this deal kind of works for the two of us. Another player kind of around that value for some other people, Ramondre Stevenson maybe. He's higher on Keep Trade Cut, but I could argue that Aaron Jones is probably the similar if not better option there. But they both have a lot of question marks after this season, especially. So I would be willing to upgrade from Aaron Jones to Jonathan Taylor with the 107.
Love it. Appreciate it very much. And talking more running backs. So we're moving on to the 108. The Dynasty Rewind ADP suggests Brian Thomas. Again, if you want in on that Dynasty Rewind ADP or the Discord, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, get a free 7-day trial. Check it out. But my compensation that I'm looking for to get for this pick, again, I got to know my audience, and I know you are not as high on Kyren Williams as I am. I'm looking to get Kyren Williams in a second, and I very much believe in Kyren Williams, the talent. I've been in on him. Got a little shaky with that combine, I'll be honest. That combine was not pretty. But I believe in production, and the NFL production has suggested that he is built to play in this league one way or another. But I know you don't believe, and I know the allure of Brian Thomas is calling out to you, or JJ McCarthy, depending on draft capital and landing spot, might be calling out to you as well. There's no way you're not taking this exit strategy for the 108 to give me Kyren Williams plus a second.
Yeah, I think you got me pegged here, Bob. That's for sure. If we do attach the name of Brian Thomas to this pick, I'm a little bit more hesitant to move Kyren in a second, because I just love my second round picks. I really value my second round picks. I think there's a lot of value there. I would definitely do Kyren in a third for this if it was Brian Thomas. But if it is JJ McCarthy and he's on the Vikings and he's my pick at 108, then this is I'll do
trading
Kyron in
out.
a second. No problem. Yeah, that's my exit strategy from Kyron at a second. Go get JJ McCarthy on the Vikings. No problem at all. But even if it's Brian Thomas, going to the Bills, let's say, I still think the value's there for Kyron Williams in a second. I think that's totally more than fine to ask for. I just personally really love my seconds, and I like to squeeze all the value out because I know my audience too. I know you like Kyron Williams a good bit. So, I would be countering with a Kyron Williams in a third. Maybe I'll give you a third this year. I won't make you wait another year for a third. I'll give you like the 303. We just keep going back to the 303.
Ooh, I'm pretty happy with that. I think I could do that. Although, like I said, if JJ's on the board, I'm asking more. Yeah. But if it is Brian Thomas, like we're attaching the pick for, and like you said too, you absolutely should know the audience of the trade offers you're getting. I'm higher on Kyron Williams. You should almost cater to whoever sends the trade is who you should cater to the values of somewhat the most is, hey, you believe in Kyron. I'm going to make you pay up for Kyron, even though I don't believe. Yeah. Just a little notch to add in your tool belt again. Moving on to the 109 and 110, we're going to bundle some picks up here to move things along that little bit. So 109, 110, Dynasty Rewind ADP, JJ McCarthy, and Troy Franklin are the picks here, the suggested draft picks. Nate, what are you hoping to get out of these picks?
All right. So once again, I like to look at this as the 109 and 110. Let's say JJ McCarthy's off the board. I know DR ADP still has him here at the 109, but I think if he does go in that top 10, top 15 to a good landing spot, I think most of us are going to look at him as the 108 by that time. So let's say this is the Brian Thomas Jr. and the Troy Franklin. This is like that next tier of wide receivers. I like those guys, but also can I move those for a wide receiver that I've already seen perform in the NFL straight up? And that's Nico Collins, who just got a little bit cheaper and a little bit more accessible because of the Stephon Diggs trade. Mm-hmm. And I love the idea of taking one of these picks outside the top 8 and moving it for Nico Collins straight up. I think it's a deal that you can absolutely make. I think we've seen it on Twitter. We've seen it in our Discord where people are able to trade, a late first. Maybe you do have to add something on a little bit if, the other team does believe in Nico Collins still. But if you have someone that loves Stephon Diggs and they got Nico Collins and they're like, wow, man, there's so much target competition in this Houston Texans offense. I just don't believe that Nico Collins can put up the same kind of numbers that he did last year. This is my way out. I can get younger, re-roll. I think it's a deal that makes sense for both parties oftentimes. But for me, what Nico Collins did last year was so impressive, especially after the catch. I love guys that create yards after the catch, and he did that at an elite level last year. So I would be looking to move a late first, one of these 109, 110 for Nico Collins.
I 100% agree. I think with the Diggs trade, there's definitely a lot more people willing to make this trade than there were a couple weeks ago when this wasn't even on anybody's radar. But overall, I still have a pretty positive outlook for 2024 for Nico. Definitely beyond 2024. Diggs is only slated to be there for 1 year. I know that Nico's contract is up for discussion as well, but I just, for me, looking at the directions I have to go with this, if I'm a rebuilding team, I could probably eat a year of Nico not having the greatest production. If I'm a competitive team, a rookie doesn't really help the production concerns I have for this year. So it just doesn't kind of make a ton of sense. It just make me less excited to make this kind of deal. So for that reason, that just doesn't quite work for me. I need either a second round pick in return, or maybe I can get can we work a deal to, send Mike Evans with one of those picks, and I'll send a second back to like flip, give me some youth back with Mike Evans.
Some youth?
With the pick, I mean.
With Mike Evans.
Along with Mike Evans. Not Mike Evans is not super young anymore, but can still hopefully rely on some production. That's something that's the course I would want to take with the pick. Because like I said, if I'm competitive, I'm not trusting a rookie to help me out that much. And you shouldn't. A lot of rookies, as spoiled as we've been with some rookie production, we've also had a lot of spoiled rookie production that has not been as good. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Is there, can you give me a second back, or can we work Mike Evans into that deal, sending along with the first round pick? I send you Nico and a second. Maybe we flip things around, something like that. Or I think that's how I want that to work in my head.
Yeah. So I think this trade's a little bit easier if Brian Thomas is the pick. If you have the 109 and Brian Thomas is on there, and say he went to the Buffalo Bills and now he's the future wide receiver one for Josh Allen. I mean, I think you probably can make this deal straight up. Now, if it doesn't work out that way and it is the 110 maybe, and that 110 doesn't look as strong, but then again, if Brian Thomas is the 109, I also think the 110 is probably going to be a really good spot too. It's going to be a first-round wide receiver who is probably in a really good position as well. So once some names get attached to this and we see some landing spots, you probably can do this deal straight up once that rookie fever really hits max. But until then, I do agree value-wise. I understand, you want something back, not straight up for Nico, because you like me. You also believe that
I am a Nico guy.
Nico's there. We're not worried about Nico. I'm good. I'm good with giving you the 1-9, 110, whatever it is, and Mike Evans for Nico. And, whether it's a 25-second, I'm hoping that you're not a competing team in that instance. I don't really want a late 25-second in this trade, but I'll take like an early to mid second, whether that's 2024 or 2025.
Sure. Let's shoot for a 25 adjacent second.
Because
if I'm not competitive, I wouldn't be adding Mike Evans. So that I think that's a solid enough deal for that one. But let's move on to the next one. Round out the first round. Full pun intended, I guess. 111, 112, Dynasty Rewind, ADP. Jonathan Brooks and Xavier Worthy are the suggested picks, the Texas duo. And this is the point in drafts where I'm kind of willing to just look at a reroll for 2025 first. As maybe boring as it is or not, whatever it is. If I can make a significant trade down to the late second, early third, and maybe pick up that 25 first, great. You get to move up a full round, but I get your first next year, kind of a thing. If I walk away with just a 25 first and 25 third for, because unless you're getting a significant chance of a higher reroll where it's like, well, this is an early to mid 25 first versus just another late 25 first, there's not a ton of value in that. You're kind of hoping for a catastrophic meltdown for a team, which I'll admit can happen. But if I'm moving back, I should get something in return, whether it's a pick, an additional pick, or just some player of consequence that is worth chucking into my lineup. If this was my first and I could get just some, somebody like Chase Brown, maybe somebody who's kind of at this point, it depends what side of the fence people are on with Chase Brown for sure.
But like third round value with a bit more that you know about.
Exactly. And a little bit of upside baked in. Just some on top for my trouble. So Nate, what are you kind of willing to do with this deal? Are you kind of willing to sacrifice a future first to get into the end of this first round and something on top to make this happen? Or what are you thinking?
I am. I'm willing to move. I'm probably a competing team if I'm moving my 25 first for, a player now in this draft. I'm trying to get, whether that's a player that I think is going to go in my lineup or maybe that player that's just going to boost that next man up. If we're playing basketball, it's the sixth man on my team, going after like Xavier Worthy or Jonathan Brooks and like they're the next guy up when I have that bye week moving forward. Maybe for me, maybe it's Lad McConkey for me, but I have nothing against moving a 25 first and a third on top or third round value, like a guy like Chase Brown, that throw-in piece to go ahead and get someone this year. I think that's a trade that works for both teams, especially if you didn't necessarily earn this pick and you had previously traded for it. You're a team that maybe has 3 first-round picks. You've already made 2 picks in this first round. Now you're looking here at the 111, 112. There's not like an obvious best player available at this point. The board's a little bit open, so you don't need to make a pick. So it works in your favor to go get a pick next year. And if you value it at the 111, 112 of next year, then it, like I say all the time, if you value a pick in the future at the very end of the round, you're only going to be happy with that pick because it can only get better from there. I might be a competitive team, but it might not work out. Maybe I'm just not quite that good. And I'm still competitive and I become the 109. You still have a better pick. Next year's class looks pretty good as well, but maybe my team does fall apart and you end up with the 105 or something like that. It could be a huge trade for you. So there's potential for you. There's potential for me. This trade works for both of us. I'm happy to make it.
I'm happy making it too. And I'm happy moving along into the second round. You got a nice, interesting pick slotted in here. I like that you threw it on the board. So we're in the early second. We're looking at the 201 to 203. Like I said, combining some pick ranges here, similar values anyway. You're kind of splitting hairs on difference of value at this point. What are you trying to get for this 201 to 203 range? Something in that area. What do you think?
Yeah, this is very timely, very relevant. And I'm going after a guy like Rashee Rice. We just talked about Nico Collins taking advantage of recent moves that have devalued him. Rashee Rice, there's some off the field issues that have devalued him as well. We've seen his value fall a little bit as Marquise Brown went there. We've heard rumors about the Chiefs, grabbing another wide receiver, whether it be in the first round or day 2. Some things really haven't been going Rashee Rice's way already this offseason. But then the off the field issues with the accident down in Texas and, what's to come out of that has worried some people. And there's also been a spread of misinformation around it, which has been really disappointing, even coming from Sleeper itself, sending out some notifications that were not well vetted. He's not going to jail for the 10 grams of marijuana that was found in his car. That is a very low misdemeanor. There's other things that definitely need to be worked out there, but luckily it sounds like there has not been any major injuries or death that have been associated with the accident. So when we take a step back from the empathetic side of what happened and we just look at it from a fantasy football standpoint, it's unlikely that this is going to really impact Rashee Rice's career. I doubt at this point that there's even going to be a suspension. Even if there is, it would be very minor, more likely fines, and then just let the court system figure out whatever they need to figure out. The NFL will probably stay out of it. So with that, I think there's an opportunity to buy in on Rashee Rice right now, who is still an incredible wide receiver, produced extremely well for a rookie last year, on one of the best offense with the best quarterback in the NFL. You're not moving a first-round pick for him right now. And I wouldn't. There's still enough risk there, not just with the off the field, but also the on field stuff, that I'm not going to move a first round pick for him at this point. I want to see what happens through the draft first. But moving an early second for a wide receiver that produced so well in his rookie season and is tied to such a great offense, it seems like a really good move to make if you're a competing team. Even if you're a rebuilding team, Rashee Rice is plenty young. I think he's someone that you can build around, as your wide receiver 3 moving forward. If you want to be a competing team, I necessarily love him as a wide receiver 1 or 2, but I think your wide receiver 3, even maybe at this value, maybe your flex. I think there's a lot of potential to buy in right now. It's accessible and there's upside baked in. While, even if things don't necessarily go his way, I think he would at least maintain this value moving forward.
Yeah. And first off, not making this deal, but that said, if you're in the market for taking some risk, albeit like you laid it up beautifully, that, I think at this point, kind of going with my gut, I don't think much is going to happen. But that said, we don't know all the details. There's a lot of, like you said, misinformation out there. Just got to chill, take a seat back. And if you have Rashee Rice, no chance I'm moving him for this, because he's performed better than this range 100%. He's better than the wide receivers that are left on the board, in my opinion. He's in a better situation, albeit with competition coming in from Marquise Brown, than the receivers that are probably going to be in that are on the board. So I'm staying put unless I can get what he was going for before the incident, which is a later first round pick, a 108 to 110. If we were talking about a pick in that range, I'd be much more open to it. My biggest bit of advice: if you have him, hold him. If you can't buy him for a lower rate, don't. I don't think there's a mad hat dash to run for him at this point. But that's just where I'm at. So I probably won't even send back a counter unless you happen to have one of these picks, because like I said, I'm not scared enough at this point to want to do this. So I'd say hold. And we've seen a lot of interaction in our Discord where he's going, not necessarily our Discordians are selling him at that rate or buying him at that rate, but they've shared trades of getting moved for mid to late seconds.
Yeah.
And, people getting Rashee Rice and a 3rd round pick back. So it's like, he's going for cheap. Knocking through doors. Like I said, if you're willing to take some risks, there is obviously more that could come out. He could get slapped with a huge suspension. It's all in bounds until it isn't, and but it also isn't in bounds until it isn't,
Yeah.
So
actually, I saw Rashee Rice go in one of my leagues just the other night. Mike and I were recording the podcast. Someone put Rashee Rice on the trade block, and he got moved before the podcast was even over. I didn't even get a chance to go after him. Unfortunate, but someone moved Rashee Rice and a 3rd round pick for Jerry Jeudy, a 25-second and a 26-second. And I'm disappointed I didn't get to make that deal.
Moving along the board here, looking at the early mid-second, so the back half of the front of the second, whatever, you get it. Splitting it into quarters so we can split this up evenly. Early mid-second, 204 to 206 range. If you want the ADP for those guys, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. I'm looking to get somebody like Terry McLaurin. At this point in drafts, I think you're looking at guys who have either are old-ish and have produced and have reliable production that you can rely on, or you're looking at unproven youth, like a Josh Downs. You could probably move one of these picks for Josh Downs too, but it's kind of apples and apples at that point. Like you're kind of just doing the same thing. And as much as I love the talent of Josh Downs, I think we can all acknowledge he's not going to be a wide receiver one. He is in that, wide receiver 2-3 range of end of day production, probably, since he is limited to the slot, limited by size, and maybe limited in that offense now, as we touched on previously with Michael Pittman. Love the player, but I can acknowledge that either way. Looking at Terry McLaurin, hoping to get a 25 third on top. And I mentioned him earlier. As much as I'd love to go get Mike Evans at this cost, I don't think there's many situations where somebody's selling Mike Evans for a pick in this range, just based on if Mike Evans is on a team, there's a good chance it's not a rebuild, unless it's possible. I won't rule it out. Certainly wouldn't rule it in either. But with Terry McLaurin, likely ends up playing with the best quarterback of his career. And if you're competitive and need some reliable depth at an affordable cost, I don't know if there's much better value out there than going after Terry McLaurin. Maybe you get a 25 third on top. Maybe you don't. If you just get the player, I think you're pretty happy with it at the end of the day. So your thoughts on this one, Nathaniel?
Yeah, I think if you move a mid-second for Terry McLaurin, I think I'd be pretty happy with that. I think that's a good deal to make. I'm not necessarily going to make that deal for you, though.
Sure.
I think asking for Terry McLaurin for a mid-second, I think that's a good start. I think that's a conversation. I think you can probably make that deal in some situations. But, I was just taking a look at our DR ADP and, looking at it positionally, I don't like any of the wide receivers that much at this point to take over Terry McLaurin straight up. So I'm definitely not going to add a third on here. There's some running backs there that maybe if I need running backs and I have some wide receiver depth, I don't mind moving Terry McLaurin to go get one of those running backs that I like in this draft, depending on the landing spot. But I'm probably going to move off of Terry McLaurin and go to a different wide receiver to send to you for the mid-second round pick. I would move Josh Downs for this pick. I don't know if you would take Josh Downs straight up. I'd probably do Josh Downs in a third. I would consider Josh Downs in a third for this pick as well. If there was a running back that I really like there.
I like that. I think I would, in all honesty, like I said, that was, somebody I pointed to. And, I think I would certainly be tempted because I love Josh Downs, and a third round pick I can do something with later. Yeah. If not draft somebody with it, because, as picks get later and later, they become that much more dart throws. But they're great for trading up and great for sprinkling in some value on deals. So with that said, I think we have a done deal on that one. So moving into the mid-second, the front end of the back half of the second, whatever, the third, fourth.
Mid to late.
You get it. So the 207 to 209 range, it's tough when you break them up like this, silly Bob. But it is what it is. Nate, what are you looking to get out of this range of picks? It's an interesting one. It's a discussion that needs to be had that I don't know if we've had enough on this channel yet, but what do you got?
Yep. All right. So, at this point, we're getting into the back half of the second round. Maybe I don't like the options on here. I like second round picks. So I've talked about that plenty. So I would want a 25 second round pick, but I don't want to move just, if this was the next part here where we're talking about the final picks in the second round, sure. Then I'm looking to just kind of re-roll in the second round next year. But at this point, it's a little too early to just move this for a future second straight up. So I need something on top. And in this draft, we've talked about how there's not like a ton of running backs that we necessarily love to fill into our lineup. There's some running backs that we'd certainly like, but it's going to depend on situation and, landing spot and what's around them in that backfield. I'm a productive team. I need some production at the running back position. I want that 25 second to move out of the second round here, but also I need a running back. And I don't like what's on the options on the board. I'd rather just get a running back next year in the second round pick. None of these guys on the board I feel confident about, giving me year one production from my competing team. So I'm going to ask for Gus Edwards on top of that 2025 second for this 2024 second, whether it's the 207, 208, because Gus Edwards, he's probably 1 year rental, but I like his upside this year in the LA Chargers offense with Jim Harbaugh. I think he's probably going to get a lot of goal line touches. So, you might not be as interested in Gus Edwards. You might not need him in your team as much if you're going after this pick here. So I feel like this is a reasonable ask, a 2025 second for Gus Edwards. What do you think, Bob?
I don't hate it. I struggle with the 25 second because anytime
I would expect that 25 second to be late, by the way. I'm not,
Sure.
I'm expecting this from a competing team. If you're projecting that 25 second as an early one, I would not expect, I would expect a swap, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, the lines get blurred a little for me. I'd rather counter. I have a relatively early 24 third.
Oh, okay.
I was going to say a 25 third, but I'm like, I'm willing to move up into this range of the draft. There's some wide receivers on the board. There's a tight end you might be able to look at. Heck,
Mhm.
you might be able to look at a day 2 quarterback here. So I'm willing to give you a relatively early third. Let's go back to good old 303, old
303, baby.
reliable Gus Edwards in the 303 for a pick in this range. A little bit of a trade up. I'm not as big on Gus Edwards. I think the Chargers are as much of a culprit to add somebody in the draft as anybody.
Yep.
And for me, I think that really hurts Gus Edwards, long-term value. Has been dealing with some injuries over the past couple of years, dealing with some inconsistencies. We know he's limited as a overall ball carrier. He's good in a role, and I think that role is going to be, for what it's worth, utilized in this offense. But I'm just not big on Gus Edwards, so I'm fine using this to trade up, kind of consolidate some assets on my roster to trade up into that 207 range. What do you think about that, Nate?
Yeah, I'm good with this move. I'm fine moving down, half a round or something like that, to get Gus Edwards and keep that pick where I can still have somebody, a rookie that I get to add to my team that I'm excited about, but I get that, productive 1-year rental at the running back position. Maybe he's not my RB1, maybe not even my RB2, but he gives me that running back depth that helps me feel confident about my position group going into the season. So yeah, I'm happy with this deal. I think it works well for the both of us.
I love it. And moving on to the last string of picks, looking at another tight end. And, as much as I love the potential of this tight end class, because I think this class is a little better than it's been advertised so far. I think there's some gems in the rough. Mike brought it up either on the podcast or discussing with us. There's a lot of tight ends that just have really weird college careers in this class. And, dealing with COVID, dealing with transfers, the transfer portal, etc. There's a lot of nonsense being thrown around. And as much as I love Ben Sinnott, who I think ends up shaping up as the tight end 2 or 3 in this class, this class is a little sus at the tight end position either way. So if I have a pick in this range and I'm competitive and I want to go get a tight end on my roster, I need to fill in a hole, Evan Ingram is going to do so much more for me than any of the rookies at this point. And with these second round picks, like I mentioned before, you're just not getting as much bang for your buck where you can buy youth and production with the first round picks. You're getting unproven youth, as I mentioned, or older production. And the thing about production, Evan Ingram has been the one constant in that, as much as we love Christian Kirk had a great 2022, I believe, wasn't as good last year, dealt with some injuries, albeit, but Evan Ingram has been great the last 2 years with Trevor Lawrence. He's his, one of his more reliable weapons, I think you could say. I'm not sure if, and this is where you come into play. I'm not sure if I can even get Evan Ingram for just one of these picks or if I need to add a little bit more, but I think it's at least worth starting a conversation here and seeing where it goes. What are your thoughts, Nate?
I like Evan Ingram. I'm not, blind to Evan Ingram's production the last 2 years. I don't carry that New York Giants career into this coming season. He's done so well over the last 2 years, been really one of the best tight ends production wise. Especially one of the best values for productive tight ends over the last 2 years. So for me, if I was moving a pick and, going after a pick and moving Evan Ingram, I'd probably be looking for like a mid-second, to be quite honest. Okay. In this opportunity, whether we can go 2 different ways, Bob. We can either add on to your pick to get Evan Ingram. I would move Evan Ingram for the 210 and the 303. We'll give me 2 picks around this range, and that way I can get my Ben Sinnott or my JT Sanders, and then another wide receiver or running back. That way I diversify a little bit with my Evan Ingram, get younger, take that chance, and I get something else on top of it. Or maybe if you still want a tight end, but maybe you don't want Evan Ingram, some other tight ends I think you could probably go after with a late second right now that I would be willing to move. Dalton Schultz, he's had some competition added into that Texans room. But again, we're talking a late second. And while Dalton Schultz might not be with the competition at the tight end position, maybe he's not a top 12 tight end, but he's going to be really close to it. Top 15 tight end for sure. And I know that hasn't really been an exciting phrase over the last 5 years, but I think moving forward, a top 15 tight end is actually something worth value. We really haven't really said that over the last couple of years. So I think Dalton Schultz, Luke Musgrave. I don't know how you feel about Luke Musgrave versus Tucker Kraft and that whole Green Bay tight end room there. I know some people, maybe you're the Mark Andrews owner and you want Isaiah Likely. I might have to add something onto that. But I think there's some other tight ends you probably could go after with this pick straight up. But if you want Evan Ingram, I'm going to need like an early third, that 303 on top of this late second to make that move.
I will happily send you the 212 and the 303 for Evan Ingram. You have swayed me with that conversation of other tight ends of this, range. There's just with a production gap between what I
Yeah.
project off of the rest of that list, I'm
Mhm.
more than happy. Let's chuck on a third, call it a day, and
You
get
get what
Evan
you
Ingram
want.
on this. Exactly. I don't have to, there's some times where, settling is okay. And this is just not one where, like, I think the gap is too large. And I think the adding on the 303, more than happy to do. So I will call this one a done deal. And I'll call this video a done deal. This was a blast, Nate. I had a ton of fun filling
Me
this
too.
sheet out and, adding in this new concept. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this new concept. If you made it this far and enjoyed the video, please leave a like. And I highly recommend checking out patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in that Discord server for a free 7-day trial. Check out some bonus podcasts while you're there. You will not regret it. And you can talk with us anytime in that Discord. So with all of that said, all of these picks in the books and traded away, we will see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.